Welcome everyone to ARTIVISM, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. Today, Sienna Alpais, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, will introduce we'll introduce the presenter today, Jaizi Abedania. Go ahead, Sienna. Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. I think I'm supposed to introduce myself a little bit. My name's Sienna. I'm a senior in the art and design education program at Adelphi. I'm in my last semester. I'm currently student teaching at the East Rockaway School District. I love it. It's fantastic. I get to see a lot of different kids from a lot of different backgrounds, and you really see how art can reach them in a way that other subjects can't, or other subjects might miss them, and give them a voice that they don't really have in their general education classrooms. I've done a lot of work with my kids. I work for the Long Island Children's Museum. Last summer we did a art activism exhibit with the Shinnecock Nation. We had 4 artists come in and do workshops with us. It was fantastic. And I owe a lot of my interest in art and activism and student teaching and boots on the ground outreach to Jaizi for being an influence on me. This program at Adelphi has been really supportive to me, and it's professors like Jaizi that have set me on the right track. Okay. I'm not sure if there's something in the chat I should be reading, but okay. I don't think I got anything, but perfect. Okay. Jaizi Abedania is a lens-based mixed media artist and professor of digital imaging, exploring intersection concepts of identity, history, and migration through personal narrative. She's exhibited, taught, and practiced in San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Long Island, and Harlem, in support of artists and programs promoting accessibility to art and education. Welcome.
Thank you, Sienna, for that lovely introduction, and thanks for being my student ambassador. I couldn't have chosen a greater student as an example. So today, let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Today, I'm going to walk you through my teaching practice. As Sienna so kindly pointed out, I've taught a lot of places. So in a way, I view my own teaching journey as sort of a diaspora, spreading out from one consistent place. So in this presentation today, we are, as a group, going to define diversity and what it means to us. A lot of navigating diverse populations also requires that we ask ourselves, what does diversity mean? So we'll define that for ourselves and for our group. We'll learn some tips for working with diverse populations. Again, this is just off my personal experience working with diverse communities. We'll explore my journey as an arts educator. We'll take an activist inventory, so we'll get a little more hands-on later on in the presentation. We'll talk a little bit as a group about our thoughts on education, and then toward the end of our presentation today, I'll share some readings and resources to continue our learning. Okay? So, just to start out with, since this is a little talk about diversity, I'd like to know where everybody's coming in from. So if you can just drop your location in the chat, and I'm going to stop sharing briefly so I can see the chat here. Where is everybody coming in from today? Oh, we got a visitor from Queens, New York. We got some New York people. Brooklyn people. And now I'm going to ask a different question. Where does everyone consider home? Go ahead and drop that in the chat too. I'm going to drop mine as San Francisco. Because sometimes we move around a lot. Oh, we have someone coming in from the home place of Montenegro. Awesome. Awesome. Cool. And originally from India. Awesome. So that just helps me Oh, East Rockaway. Hi, Sienna. So that just gives me some context as a speaker as far as knowing where everybody's coming from. So just as a little tip, here's your first tip of the day. It's always good to know who your audience is. So consider your students sort of your audience, and then you can guide your teaching from there. So I'm going to share my screen again now that we all know where we're coming from. So my particular journey as an activist educator. So as I mentioned, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a highly diverse region. I graduated from UC Davis with a Bachelor of Science in Comprehensive Design. And then much later, much more recently, actually, I pursued my MFA in photo, video, and related media from School of Visual Arts right here in New York. That's what brought me back to New York this time around. Before that, I was teaching experiential art and environmental education to youth in East Palo Alto, San Mateo, Seattle, Brooklyn, the Bronx. And this has sort of been the foundation of much of my teaching practice, is teaching in experiential art and environmental education. Aside from that, I've also taught in traditional school settings. So I was a middle school, high school art teacher, working the 9 to 5 of a traditional art teacher hustle. I've also worked for after school programs, and I worked in a really unique school that I'll talk about a little later that had individualized education plans for every single student. So I saw each student one-to-one, which is very revolutionary, I think. Arjun, you had something to add? Yeah, okay. Currently, I'm a professor here at Adelphi University, where I'm zooming in from today. I'm a teaching artist with Brooklyn Museum, and I'm also a teaching artist with a documentary program in New York called Girl Be Heard. We teach documentary filmmaking to young women. So that's a new enterprise for me, which has been a lot of fun. So I'd like to ask the question to the group, and I'm going to invite you guys to unmute yourself. I'm going to ask the question, what is diversity? So just because I can't see what's in the chat, if you guys just want to, with your voice, just say anything that comes to mind when you think of the word diversity. So what is diversity?
I would say a variety of backgrounds and perspectives.
Yep, a variety of backgrounds and perspectives. Definitely, that is part of what diversity is.
Acceptance.
Sorry?
Acceptance.
Acceptance, yes, being accepting of each other's backgrounds and where our perspectives are from. Anyone else? Okay, well, I've listed some of what we've already discussed here. So diversity of cultural influences, diversity of, this is one we don't often think of, but socioeconomic backgrounds, diversity of learning abilities, right? Diversity of learning styles, which goes hand in hand with learning abilities, diversity of personal experiences. So I think we talked a little bit about the diversity of backgrounds, right? So this is sort of what diversity looks like to me as an educator. This is me, very long time ago, baby self. So this is one of the first communities, diverse communities I taught with. This is way back in the day when I lived in Seattle, Washington. So this community came together, as you can see, from all walks of life, all different kinds of background, in the celebration of photography. So RG and I were talking a little earlier while we were candidly just sort of having a conversation. I am a self-taught photographer. So here I've collaborated with another working artist in Seattle, and they were creating a portfolio of portraits based on the sort of concept of checking the box on a census or for demographics. So this is just one example of how my personal teaching practice brings me to connect with a lot of other artivists. So this portfolio was put on exhibition in several different galleries around Seattle, so it got a lot of bandwidth. And I think the portraits are really a beautiful representation of a highly diverse community. So that's just an example of where this kind of work can lead you to interact with other artivists. And this person's name is Lottie Walker, L-O-T-I. Highly suggest you look up their work if you're appreciating these portraits. So this is a list of a whole host of other organizations I've taught with throughout the years. I just want to point out that in a lot of these instances, I was working with historically underrepresented communities. Specifically, I want to point out East Palo Alto, California. Does anyone know about East Palo Alto? Does anyone know Palo Alto? I'm sure we've all, in one stage or another, heard about the glorious Silicon Valley. So Palo Alto itself is a very economically advantaged, let's say, part of town where I'm from. And East Palo Alto is the town just across the freeway from that, which is where I did a lot of my early work in teaching. So I just want to point out that sometimes this work can take you a lot of different directions, but it's important to stay true to your personal cause, which we're going to go over a little later when we take our artivist inventory. So a lot of what I do for these organizations is art planning, or art lesson planning rather, and instruction for mixed media. This is actually a clip from a video I made for the Brooklyn Museum quarantine because of the COVID pandemic. I was still making videos to try to educate young learners in arts skills during the whole pandemic. So this is a lot of what I do, is instruction for mixed media. But along the way, I've worked in administration also. I was the volunteer coordinator for that same photography program that I mentioned earlier. So I was also a mentor through that organization. So I was not only teaching photography, but mentoring students, assisting their volunteer mentors also with scheduling time to be with their mentees, scheduling time for these lovely field trips. We were on a boat for this field trip, which was very exciting. So this is also what some of my work involves, is coordinating entire communities of volunteers, which can be kind of tricky. This is the fun stuff. This is a lot of the fun stuff that I do. So these are some examples of murals that I've made in the New York area. The one on the right-hand side was with a middle school in the Bronx. And the one on the left-hand side has kind of a funny story behind it. I worked with a football team of teenage boys to create this lovely mural in their weight room. But I got to tell you, it was a real learning experience. I learned a lot about the, let's say, hygiene habits of young high school boys in their after school hours. And I think they learned a lot about, thanks. I think they learned a lot about what women are also capable of. Now, you have to understand, these are high school boys. You know, high school boys come in all shapes and forms, but sometimes they have sort of a warped perspective of how women should function in the world. So I was in this weight room with the young men doing pull-ups, doing my quad lifts, doing their workouts with them to try to prove to them, thanks Sienna, to try to prove to them that looks can be deceiving. You know, I am a very kind of petite, small person, but I pack a punch. So this was just an example of how you can also engage in cultural exchanges through this kind of work. I don't know if lifting weights is necessarily culture, but we learned a lot about each other through this, working on this mural. So this is sort of the product of the work that I do. These are some photographs from the studio art program. I work at Brooklyn Museum also, as I mentioned, and these are some more serious photographs that were taken again right after the pandemic. Here, my students were dealing with a lot of identity issues, as you can see in the one on the left-hand side. This young person was probably no more than, I would guess, 12 or 13 years old, and expressing some very deep, sort of masked and hidden emotions. Here you can see she put like a little drop of water to make it look like she was crying in the studio session. So through artwork, I think our students are allowed to express certain things that they wouldn't normally be able to say with words, which I think is the activist power of the arts. And these are some examples from my students here at Adelphi University. So for this project, it was a simple design project, design a poster, right? That's what the curriculum asked them to do. But I took it a step further and I said, design a poster related to a social justice cause. So that required that the students do some extra research, look up statistics, look up facts, look up images related to these social justice issues. And some of them, you know, again, speaking about students who are able to use art to say things that are difficult to say otherwise, I want to share this piece. I want to share this piece with you guys, a little bit of a trigger warning. This is by a student who was very concerned with the amount of gun violence in our nation. So as you can see, the pattern of this rabbit or this snake that is referencing the "Do Not Tread on Me" flag that was popular during the yeah, thank you. So all of these cities here are places where gun violence has occurred, and the ones that are around the site of this Second Amendment bullet entry, those are the more recent occurrences of gun violence. So actually, this student had a lot of trouble presenting this to the class because they thought it was a little too heavy-handed, but I think it's a beautiful expression of sort of speaking out against these acts of gun violence. And this student is a very quiet person who's able to say very big things through their art. I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's really a powerful work of artivism. How am I doing on time, guys? Good? Okay. All right. So I mentioned that some of my teaching practice was in environmental education, and this is where things kind of get weird because I'm predominantly an artist, a teaching artist, but I also love nature. I grew up in California, so hiking, camping, backpacking, those are my bread and butter. So back when I was a younger person and could take really long hikes for several hours at a time, I worked with a great organization called the Student Conservation Association. And I'm going to tell another weird story, okay? Because when you're a teaching artist for as long as I have been, you make a lot of weird connections. So I was at, as you guys might know, I was at training for Student Conservation Association many, many years ago. And I met the musical artist that I'm about to play for you. This is a very old meme YouTube video that has now 4 million views. It's got a good beat.
Moving on my scraper, but I'm moving on my scraper, but my scraper bang on board. I don't need no cord.
Okay, so I met this young man, he's not on screen yet, this young man right here, Champ, baby Champ. So he is also an artivist working out of Oakland, California. Here, let me get back to my screen share here. So this is our guy in question right here. This is Champ. So his real name is Tyrone Stevenson, but I think he should run for the mayor of Oakland as King Baby Champ because he's quite the public figure. So what Champ does is he works with the local Oakland youth to create what the neighborhood has termed scraper bikes. So these are bicycles that are outfitted with trash, with recycled materials, with spray paint, with any sort of art material that we can get our hands on to create these scraper bikes that have become synonymous with Oakland now. And they actually have a very strong presence as the original scraper bike team. And as you can see, they impact the lives of young people in Oakland on the bike, which I think is pretty cool. They do bike rides through Oakland. They do bike rides across the recently opened span of the Bay Bridge. And I think they do a lot of really cool things in the community. So this is just an example of how keeping an open mind and following your heart's desire, whether that be in nature or art or music or whatever, can lead you to make some really powerful connections with equally as creative people. Speaking of which, I also am really into supporting my fellow educators of color. So this past semester, I was given the great opportunity to run a workshop here at Adelphi University, which was actually in collaboration with the ARTIVISM Club. Some of our performance was. So through that workshop, I brought in some of my friends from New York, Noe Gaitan, who is this gentleman here with a lemon, that is a self-portrait of himself, and Jordan Cruz. So Jordan Cruz's works are seen here. Both of these educators and artists I would also consider artivists. As you can see, Jordan's work it exists as public works of art. So here Jordan is referencing traditions of votive burning or candle burning as part of a devotion in Catholic ritual, which is what Jordan, her background, speaking of backgrounds and diverse backgrounds, Jordan's referencing her Catholic upbringing here, but she's creating these votives out of barricades. And she posts these outside of places that are being heavily gentrified or are undergoing zoning laws to try to bring awareness to that issue in these neighborhoods. Jordan has to go through a lot of like signing permits with the city and getting the okay to erect these pieces. So in a way, her art also becomes a kind of activism just through the process of it, which I think is really important. Anyway, I just wanted to share how part of my practice is also gaining exposure for other artist educators of color, which I think is very important. Okay, so now we're getting to the interactive part of things, and hopefully I'm still cool on time. Okay, so tips for teaching to diverse populations. And my note takers in the house, this might apply to you if you want to take some notes. Again, this is just based off my personal experience. Okay, so first of all, let empathy guide your practice. Okay, so as I did at the start of this little presentation, I kind of very briefly got to know where everybody was coming from. So it's good to get to know your students and your communities on a personal level first. Because if you just kind of come in and say, well, I think you guys need this. I think you need to work on this. I think your diverse population actually needs this. You're going to sound kind of silly because you don't know what your community is actually about quite yet. So I would suggest as soon as you meet up with a new organization or a community that you're teaching to, get to know them on a personal level first. Work that empathy, okay? Be open to new experiences. So a lot of teaching will challenge us to keep an open mind, but when you're a teacher who's working with diverse populations, you have to remember that you're going to meet a wealth of new people with their own new experiences. So it's important to keep a very open mind about what what you think a proper quote unquote background or experience to come from really is. And if you think about it, there is no such thing as proper experience. So just remember that. Plan your lessons around a range of student abilities and interests. Keep your guidance open-ended to allow for freedom of student expression. So when you're working with diverse populations, and even if you've gotten to know your student community very well, there's always going to be a range of student abilities and a range of interests. So when you're like, for example, when I planned that lesson with the social justice posters, I made sure that I kept that prompt very open-ended. I just said, hey, make a poster based around a social justice issue that is of concern to you. And because of leaving it open-ended like that, I was able to get some really cool, I thought, some very cool projects out of it. Anyhow, sorry, I'm backing up too far. Another helpful hint I have for you guys is don't stop your own learning. Research innovations in teaching to learning differences on your own time. And trust me, that avenue of exploration and research is always ongoing. Attend professional development workshops if you can. If your institution or your employer offers those sorts of things, do it. I think it's a great opportunity to learn more through your own practice. And very important, this one's the biggest. Okay, so when you're working with diverse populations, there's this sort of intrinsic need. You kind of feel like you want to save the world in a way, but it's impossible. You're one person and you can't do it all on your own, and you're not doing it on your own. Look at us. We're all here enjoying this presentation together. You're not alone in this struggle. So remember, we're all out here doing the work together. Okay, so don't take it personal if that student doesn't like your lesson plan or, doesn't quite grasp the content yet. Because it does take some time and you're just one person. Oh, and this is a inspirational photo of Edward James Olmos in Stand By Me, because why not? Because he's a great example of teaching to very diverse communities. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit interactive. Everyone go ahead and take out a sheet of paper and a pencil. And we're just going to write for 5 little minutes. So I'd like everyone to make an activist inventory. So first you're going to write a list of the skills and qualities you possess as an activist. So these could be very concrete, like I'm very organized, or they can be very abstract, like I'm very patient, I'm very dedicated, I'm very self-motivated. So you're writing a list of the qualities you already possess. Then you're writing a list of the qualities you wish you had as an activist. And then if you like and you have time, write a few short sentences reflecting on the ways you can continue cultivating these things in your life. Okay? So let's take a couple short minutes. I said 5 minutes, but I'm checking time. Let's take 3 minutes, just 3 short minutes. And we will have opportunities to share. Okay, about 2 more minutes, friends. Sorry, it's the teacher in me. Okay, about 1 more minute to finish up those thoughts. Okay, about 30 seconds. Okay, so I feel like people, does anyone need more time? Raise your hand if you need more time. Okay, looks like everyone's good. We're gonna put that to the side for a second, and I have a little more writing for you, okay? So, oops. Okay, so this one is a little more involved. They're sort of color-coded based on little chunks of questions you can ask yourself, okay? So the ones in green are a little set of questions that you can write about for the next few minutes. What challenges does the modern day student face? What challenges does the modern day teacher face? How can we offer solutions in our classrooms and through teaching? So that's one little chunk of questions you can be thinking about. The next one is a little more abstract. So if you're feeling like you want to go there today, feel free. In what ways does education affect society? And in what ways does it reflect society? And then lastly, if you want to build on your previous writing you were doing, you can write about how can you use the skills listed in your activist inventory to impact the future of education. Okay, so these are a little heavier writing prompts. So we'll take about, let's say, 4 minutes with these. Okay, sorry. I know we're running out of time. 4 minutes for here. About 2 more minutes, friends, 2 more minutes. Okay, I'm gonna shorten it teacher time style. Let's take about 30 more seconds to finish up our thoughts. And I am gonna take volunteers, so anyone want to share? Yeah, is that Sienna coming on to share? Go ahead,
I
Sienna.
can get us started if no one else is ready.
Oh, sorry, my
Okay.
my video is still running in the background here. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts on this subject because it's been the topic of my thesis this year. Kids are really struggling post-COVID, especially, and their teachers are struggling too. Our students are falling behind on all grade levels in reading and math. I think it's 6 months to a year behind on average. They're lacking social skills. They're lacking interpersonal conflict skills. They don't know how to self-regulate. They're not aware of their own emotions, and they're much more likely to report being lonely, anxious, or depressed. It's a mess. Classrooms are getting bigger and teacher supports are being taken away because we're getting more and more time away from COVID. The districts want us to go back to normal, but we're never going to be able to, and especially not if we just pretend nothing happened. I've been seeing in my classrooms and in my research that one of the best ways to tackle this is really pushing social emotional learning. I think we kind of just assume that kids know what feelings are and how to identify them and how to handle them without us telling them how to. But if we don't give them the vocab and the tools to recognize their own feelings and handle it, they're not gonna just learn. It's not just gonna come out of them. So if you really focus on self-expression and learning what do I feel and why do I feel the way I do, and how do the other people feel around me when I interact with them, I think that's something you can implement in any subject, any classroom, and it really makes a difference in behavior and in student happiness.
Thank you, Sienna. Sorry for the music. Anyone else? Oh, Evelina, is that Evelina? Go ahead.
Yep, that's correct. I kind of wrote a similar thing, but a little less. I definitely think that students need hands-on experiences where they can make visible change or just visible progress to gain confidence in their ability. And that's kind of reflective of my inventory, where I noticed like I think I have good empathy and communication skills, but I'm lacking confidence and initiative to kind of make the change that I want to make.
That's very self-aware. Thank you for sharing that, Evelina.
And there's something from Giancarlo Lopez in the chat.
Yeah, I can read that. So Giancarlo writes, education is both a mirror and a motor of society. It reflects societal norms and challenges, yet it also has the power to change them. Today's students face a myriad of challenges, including technological distractions, information overload, and mental health pressures. Teachers, on the other hand, are grappling with diverse classrooms, integrating technology in meaningful ways, and often insufficient resources. Solutions lie in adapting education systems to be more inclusive, holistic, and adaptable to individual needs. This means recognizing different learning styles, providing support for mental health, and ensuring equitable access to technology and resources. Education affects society by shaping future citizens, cultivating critical thinkers, and preparing individuals for the workforce. And then Giancarlo goes on to explain Conversely, it reflects society through the values it imparts and the priorities it sets. And then I'm going to stop reading there just because of time, but thank you, Giancarlo, for that. I could not have said that better myself. I mean, you clearly are very passionate about teaching and very, very knowledgeable also. Thank you for sharing your insight with our group. Okay. So do I still have time to share a little bit more? Okay. So I got my screen share working again. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to leave you guys with some reading recommendations. These are just some books I've been reading lately for my own teaching practice. The one on the right-hand side, maybe some of us have seen before, the landmark book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. My art educators in the house, Sienna included, pick up a copy of this book. It is like required reading for artivists. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, Brazilian pedagogist or educator. Really, really revolutionary stuff. Piggybacking off of that is Bell Hooks. I didn't know until very recently that Bell Hooks was actually a contemporary of Augusto Boal and Paulo Freire, and that she actually had conversations with them. So that's pretty cool. Bell Hooks is a leading feminist thinker, and she wrote this trilogy of books. I've only read this one, Teaching to Transgress, and it's a great read. I highly, highly recommend it. And at the bottom here is a quote by Bell Hooks: "To educate as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that anyone can learn." And it sounds kind of simplistic, but the way she writes, it's very true. And then I'm going to read this quote by Paulo Freire. "A revolutionary leadership must accordingly practice co-intentional education. Teachers and students, leadership and people, co-intent and reality are both subjects, not only in the task of unveiling that reality and thereby coming to know it critically, but in the task of recreating that knowledge. As they attain this knowledge of reality through common reflection and action, they discover themselves as permanent recreators. In this way, the presence of the oppressed in the struggle for their liberation will be what it should be, not pseudo-participation, but committed involvement." And just as an example of this in practice, not to toot my own horn or anything, but this is an example of an educator leading her students in research. So this is a performance that was done with the ARTIVISM Club this past semester for that workshop I was talking about. The workshop was called Acting Up in the Classroom, an interdisciplinary model for community engagement. And through that workshop, we were looking at the work of Augusto Boal, another recommended book for reading. And I actually didn't know anything about Theater of the Oppressed before I started working with students in this workshop. So we were really exploring this new subject matter together, which I think is important for teachers to show their students that, like, we're also learning alongside you. We don't have all the answers quite yet, but we can look for them with our students. So it's important to include your students in the learning, in your own learning, whenever possible. Okay, I know I'm running out of time. Here are those books. Again, I'm requesting Theater of the Oppressed. This one's kind of a heavy read. It's very philosophical. This one, also by Augusto Boal, Games for Actors and Non-Actors, is great for teachers who want to use kinesthetic learning and more play-based activities in their classrooms. for my art educators. Teaching in the art museum has helped me out so much at Brooklyn Museum. And this book on the bottom, activity-based teaching in the art museum, I don't own a copy of it quite yet, but I'm really curious to know what's in there. The one on the left-hand side, Wicked Arts Assignments, is just a list. It's a compilation of weird art assignments that have been sent in from people from around the globe, compiled into this book. So this is a good one for my future art educators in the house. This is a good one to pull art lessons from. And again, leaving you guys with a quote by Bell Hooks: "Education as the practice of freedom is not just about liberatory knowledge, it's about a liberatory practice in the classroom." And that's by Bell Hooks from Teaching to Transgress. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for listening in and providing your own insight. I'm very, very thankful for all of you being here today to share in your practice. Thanks.
Thank you, Jaizi, for being our artivist today. Just some announcements for future events. Next Monday, April 15th, Professor Petros Panau will present the power of children's and young adult literature to engage the social imagination. For more info about past and upcoming events, you can visit the ARTIVISM website at Adelphi. Follow us on any of our social media under ARTIVISM for Shared Humanity. If you'd like to get involved in the ARTIVISM initiative, please contact our team. There are 2 open calls for artwork: the upcoming multi-venue exhibition Art from the Heart and the fall 2024 poster design open call. I would now like to ask if there are any questions for Jaizi. Please raise your hand with the raise hand function on Zoom, unmute yourself, or ask your question in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. This was great.
This was really nice, Jaizi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, RG, and thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Sienna. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and supporting. This is important work that we do, so thank you.
Carolina, your takeaway maybe?
Well, before we go there, because I think we still have a little time, and you managed time perfectly. Thank you about that. But while you're speaking, it sounds to me that a teacher, the definition of what a professor or teacher is, should also be reevaluated, because the way that you're presenting the information, it sounds to me more like a coaching exercise, right? Where co-learning is not anymore that hierarchical structure that prior, like in the 20th century was so used to, and we have to break apart from that. Also here on my notes of the exercises that we had was of the unlearning that has to be done from prior centuries, right? And how that is also affecting our learning methods. Because I believe we come from a tradition. Help me out here, from the audience. I want to hear too about this, that education as of now, it seems that depends. I mean, right, we're talking about here, like in the US, it varies globally, but it's more policy based, structurally based, it's more governmentally based rather than person centered based, as we have been discussing here. Yes, they tried to find a model that fit all and then implement all these regulations to make it happen. But now, especially after, like you were all saying, the COVID pandemic, we have to reevaluate it from that policy level, that it can be applied into a bigger swath of reach to make the changes more permanent in the way that professors and the teachers can have more freedom to do this. Because I've heard from prior presentations or other colleagues that sometimes when they try to do things like this, they get backlash from parents, they get backlash from other teachers or professors, or even their administrators, right? When they're trying to implement new ways of thinking or conducting their class or bringing forth newer approaches. Any comments, suggestions about all this?
Wow, that's an excellent question. I would say start come into any environment with already wearing the hat of an activist. Sometimes you'll have to advocate to for your revolutionary lesson plans or your sort of alternative lesson plans as soon as you get with an organization. Sometimes you have to defend your lesson plans right away. And I would suggest that you do that, even if it's very uncomfortable for you. And also I would suggest finding your peers at that organization, finding the other people who are also artivists, because you can't work, like I said before, we're not doing this on our own. And I guarantee you that there's at least one other person at the place where you work or wherever you're having this issue with, this theoretical issue. I guarantee there's at least one other person who is also identifying as an artivist. And you two can lean on each other for advocacy and support and kind of like tag team your administration, if that makes any sense. It's tough work. It requires like a thick skin, and again, not taking anything too personally is what I would suggest. Yeah.
And apropos to that, if I may add, the other day I went to this event, right? And it was about, ever since I came across it, I've been talking to everybody about it, but it was about this voting information that is going to be on the ballot here in New York for the upcoming elections to change the New York State Constitution to include, you know, kind of like everyone is protected under the law. There is no discrimination of race, gender, even like pregnancy rights, all of these categories, right? And someone in the audience was so taken by it to be like, why will someone not want to protect all of those categories, right? It seemed kind of like absurd to her that we will have to pass it through voting to change the Constitution so that all these people, right, are protected, right? And then the response was like, well, check this out, right? And that's, I think, is apropos to this, because when we're doing artivism work, we're going against the norm. And like in that example, what is the norm? Is to oppress, to enslave, is to put down, is to take advantage of, right? And as in that kind of like proposition for the Constitution, what you're dealing with is not just words and theories, but the actual practice that is then, if we protect all these differences, right? Your right to X, Y, and Z and this, that means, say like the corporate section or the economic section of society can no longer you know, exploit you because you're protected under the law. And it's the same here. What we're doing is breaking those mental ties. And by breaking those mental ties, you're giving agency to the people to then go around and break and be like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. No, I don't need to do this anymore. And that's why it's so hard. And I thank you, Professor Jaizi, for doing this work at so many levels, and all of you here on the call, because like, you know, quoting Mother Teresa, we're all a drop in the ocean, but that ocean without that drop will not be an ocean.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina. Yeah, we definitely can't do this on our own. That's why I'm glad to be a part of this club.
Yes. It's an honor to have you here presenting at the ARTIVISM initiative. Thank you to our ARTIVISM ambassador today. We hope to hear from you in the future also, that you consider being a presenter. And we have the tradition here of closing each event with a key takeaway for action, right? So this is the question for you, Professor Jaizi. And I will also ask our ARTIVISM ambassador today, let me see, Anna, okay? Both of you. What will be one key takeaway for action that you would like to leave us with today? Just go and do.
Take out a bell hooks book from the library.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. That was like the best part of my art ed courses was reading her work. And every time you pick up a book of hers, there's something new.
That's a good one. Thanks. Yeah, shout outs to Bell Hooks. This is a weird ask for people, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna invite you guys to ask your teacher a very difficult question. Like whether that be skills related or based in theory. Ask your teacher a question that you feel they may not know the answer to and see how they react. That's my takeaway for you guys. See if they're willing to learn with you. Yeah.
I like that. I like that one a lot.
Thank you.
Actually, my granddaughter will probably do that. I can ask her to ask her teacher. She's very brave like that.
Yeah, and then the follow-up question will be, why?
Why? I love it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to our sponsors, Dr. Stephanie Lake, the director of the Criminal Justice Program in the Department of Sociology at Adelphi University, Jennifer Govan from Gottesman Libraries Teachers College at Columbia University, and Monica Eunice and Camille Zamora of Sing for Hope. And thank you, Carolina, for being my teammate. We make a great team. Thank you so much. I'm grateful. And thank you, Jaizi and Sienna and everyone who was here today. Have a good evening. Be well and hope to see you back here soon.
Thank you.
Bye
Good
bye.
to have spent the eclipse together. I'm
Yes.
happy for that too.
Bye bye.